Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology. It is Wednesday, March 11th, and today we're going to talk about Jupiter's upcoming conjunction to Pluto. So both of these planets are in the sign of Capricorn right now. Jupiter's a pretty slow-moving planet, moving together with Pluto, which is an even slower-moving planet. So these are like two very titanic forces that are coming together, and there's a lot to say about this transit. First, I'm going to show you the chart, show you what it looks like, give you some of the timing. I'll give you a little picture of it, and then I'll go into talking about the archetypal combination. Before I do that, I want to remind all of you that my new classes are now open for registration. My Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic course begins in June on Sundays at noon Eastern Time. There are 30 classes on the year. You can come and study ancient astrology with me, learn how to read birth charts using classical ancient Hellenistic astrology techniques. They're amazing. I gave a demo, I think it was yesterday, I guess, but I gave a demo that was pretty cool if you want to check that out. I'll be doing some other demos and more specific advertising of the course in the weeks and months to come, but you can sign up now. The basic early bird feature that I use is if you sign up before the start date of class and you pay in one lump sum, you can get, it's about $500 off from the tuition, the normal tuition, which otherwise you can spread out over 12 months in 12 monthly installments. And then there's also need-based tuition for those people who are, hurting financially and would really like to take the course. If you think that might be you, you can check out my website is nightlightastrology.com. I've got a new website up. It should be a lot easier for people to book readings, to take my classes and register and things like that. Plus all of my blogs are there as well. And when you visit my website, I mentioned this yesterday, you can sign up to be a part of my private newsletter, where not only do I blast out all of the content that I make so that you can have regular updates when I publish something new, but I also give discounts on readings through that newsletter, discounts to different kinds of things that I do, as well as private bonus content on both Bhakti Yoga, herbal. Eventually, we're going to be doing some herbalism and astrology content, as well as other exclusive stuff. I plan to do, like, for example, I'm going to do some live birth chart readings that I record that you can actually watch to see what a birth chart reading looks like. So some exclusive stuff that I'm trying to make for people, just as a bonus and thank you for signing up for my newsletter and checking out my work. So that I just wanted to make those announcements. And also the new website, nightlightastrology.com. Yesterday, we had a little bit of a technical glitch. We had just launched it and the sign up for the newsletter feature wasn't working. So if you ran into that problem, please revisit today. It should be working now just fine. So, we tried to launch it as Mercury is turning direct, which was a good idea, but obviously Mercury's still not moving. So there was a few glitches that we got to work out, but things should be great now. Okay, so let me show you a picture of Jupiter and Pluto so that you can see what they look like right now in the sky together. And then we're going to move into talking about what this archetypal combination looks like and how you might be able to notice it in the world around you right now. So here is, oops. Let's do this. There we go. So here is Jupiter and Pluto coming together. Jupiter's at 21 degrees, Pluto is at 24 degrees, and the two are in an an engagement. That means that Jupiter is within 3 degrees of making an exact conjunction with Pluto. And anytime a planet is moving within that range in ancient astrology, we consider it to be a part of the fruiting phase, like the full moon rising. Is it at high noon yet? No, but it's rising. You can see it. It's coming. You can feel it. You can taste it. You can touch it. Similarly, 3 degrees after, the full moon is setting. It's still in the air. The fruits are still falling off the vine. So you think about 3 degrees before and after. Now, basically, this is the story of the rest of the year for Jupiter, because Jupiter is going to be in pretty close proximity with Pluto for the rest of 2020. So if we move this forward, here's what's going to happen. We're going to see Jupiter conjoin with Pluto basically the very beginning of April. And what's significant about this is that right at the beginning of April, there's a couple other transits that are perfecting. One of them is Mercury and Neptune that will be perfecting at the same time that Jupiter and Pluto is perfecting. Mars and Saturn will be perfecting at the exact same time. Those are some really significant transits to be happening at exactly the same time that we are seeing Jupiter and Pluto conjoin. So we will be tracking these transits very carefully later on this month and sort of dovetailing their meaning into the overall picture that we're painting today with Jupiter and Pluto's conjunction. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that for sure, because there's a lot more info that's going to kind of qualify today's forecast. Now, let me just show you a picture of how this evolves. So after that transit takes place, Jupiter's going to get ahead of Pluto by a little bit. And then Jupiter, if I can bring it back, is going to station in about the middle of May, which means it's stopping in the sky from our perspective. It appears to stop, and then it moves backwards. And as it moves backwards, it's going back through that 3-degree range with Pluto. So it never really leaves the range of engagement. It's as if we're talking about a full moon that's rising now, that's going to culminate in the beginning of April, and then it's going to start to set, but then doesn't really set and decides to move backward to high noon, right? And then goes back to rising, and then eventually is going to go forward again to high noon, and then back to setting. It's like a never-ending evening of a full moon in terms of the peak quality of energy of the transit that we're experiencing. So that, you can see, will take us back. Here's Jupiter about 3 degrees off from Pluto by late July, August, 19, 18, 17. It's about 5 degrees off now, maybe dying down a little bit by September. But then guess what? For election season, it's in full swing, because then Jupiter's going to pick up steam and come to within that 3-degree range again by about the end of October, beginning of November. And then Jupiter's going to conjoin with Pluto right around about the middle of November. And then Jupiter's going to go forward and be dropping out of that 3-degree range by the beginning of December. So really, we're looking at the period that we've just entered into with Jupiter, Pluto's not really ending until the end of the year. That's not a great thing in some ways. It might be a really good thing in other ways. Once we understand the full body of work that Jupiter and Pluto tends to signify, you'll see why I'm saying that. So let's talk about these two planets and what they signify. And I am going to pull up my notes, make sure I have that going for me. But I want to start by reading you something. This is the 12th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the sacred text in our Bhakti Yoga tradition that all Vaishnavas worship. And these are some descriptions of the age of Kali, which is the dark age that we're said to be living in, at least in our particular Bhakti Yoga tradition that I follow. We believe, like most Indian astrologers, that we're living in the Kali Yuga right now, which means it's a dark age. There's always light and beautiful qualities about dark ages, but here's how he describes it. And I think this is applicable for Jupiter Pluto, which is why I'm reading it. Then, O king, religion, truthfulness, cleanliness, tolerance, mercy, duration of life, physical strength, and memory will all diminish day by day because of the powerful influence of the age of Kali. In Kali Yuga, wealth alone will be considered the sign of a man's good birth, proper behavior, and fine qualities, and law and justice will be applied only on the basis of one's power. Men and women will live together merely because of superficial attraction, and success in business will depend on deceit. Womanliness and manliness will be judged according to one's expertise in sex alone, and a man will be known as a brahmana just by wearing a thread. That means sort of just by donning the apparel of a priest, the person will be recognized as holy, not really because of their inner content. A person's spiritual position will be ascertained merely according to external symbols, and on that same basis, people will change from one spiritual order to the next. A person's propriety will be seriously questioned if he doesn't earn a good living, and one who is very clever at juggling words will be considered a learned scholar. A person will be judged unholy if he doesn't have money, and hypocrisy will be accepted as a virtue. Marriage will be arranged simply by verbal agreement, and a person will think he's fit to appear in public if he has merely taken a bath. I remember long ago in ancient India, there were different standards of cleanliness, so this is sort of specific to that time, but a diminished sense of cleanliness, hypocrisy, ranged. Marriage is simply, hey, you like me, I like you. It's sort of in the Indian sense, it's a little cheapened, but at any rate, considering our divorce rate, maybe not outside of the picture of what we're dealing with right now. A sacred place will be taken to consist of no more than a reservoir of water located at a distance, and beauty will be thought to depend on one's hairstyle. Filling the belly will become the goal of life, and one who is audacious will be accepted as truthful. So Someone who observes religious life only for the sake of reputation will be considered an expert. And as the earth becomes overcrowded with a corrupt population, whoever among any of the social classes shows themselves to be strong will gain political power. So, harassed by famine and excessive taxes, people resort to having to eat leaves, roots, flesh, wild honey, fruits, flowers, and seeds. Struck by drought, they will become completely ruined. It goes on, and there's quite a list of descriptions. And these are thought to be part of the disintegration of spiritual virtues during the age of Kali. Now, why do I mention this? Because Jupiter, in a conjunction with Pluto, among other things, signifies that moral, spiritual decay. It can symbolize the decay of a justice system or a government. It can display the slow corruption of our moral or educational institutions or systems. So governments, religion, academics, and the sort of virtue that is typically thought to be inherent in learning, in spiritual or religious life, in the justice or legal system, things that Jupiter rules, will become corrupted. And this is because not only in this case is Jupiter in its fall in the sign of Capricorn, where these kinds of things tend to happen or be dealt with, but it's hitting a conjunction to Pluto, which is the ultimate symbol of death and purgation and the dark inner kind of junk that lies beneath the surface of something. So we have I wanted to read those images, not because I necessarily want to convince you that it's the age of Kali or what you should think about all of that, but because I think that those depictions that ancient astrologers and ancient saints had of the age that we were going to be degenerating into, where a lot of superficiality reigns, power, greed, superficial status, et cetera, but yet people who are supposed to be carrying the mantle of government, of justice, of religion, of education, of morality, people that are supposed to be carrying those things, they wear the external robes of those things, and yet they're cheaters, liars, consumerists, they're dominators, etc. So that is, not only is that in some ways, to me, I wouldn't be interested in bhakti yoga if I didn't think that that was a part of the depiction of reality that we're dealing with right now. This, of course, remember, you have to remember that in Indian cosmology, of course, in yogic cosmology, a dark age is followed by a light age. And there are many benefits to every age and some shadows to every age as well. So there are benefits to living in a dark age. For example, it's sort of like there's nothing like darkness to make you realize that you're in need of light. When things are light, sometimes you forget that spiritual life is important. It's sort of like, if you're feeling really comfortable in life and everything's really cushy, it's hard to remember that, you're a spirit soul that has a life after this body. You're just like, nah, I just am hanging out on the couch and everything's really comfortable. My bank account's sweet. I'm fine. I've got good insurance, whatever the case might be. And so it's harder to live in some ways. The darkness and the agitation of the age of Kali makes us, from this perspective, want to live a spiritual life. It makes the necessity to live a spiritual life a little bit more obvious and urgent. So there's always the light side. And this actually goes along with Jupiter and Pluto as well, because not only can Jupiter and Pluto, so anyway, I'm using all of this as an analogy. So the description of the Kali Yuga is sort of analogous to Jupiter and Pluto. That's what I wanted to start with today. And the dark side is going to be the corruption, decay, disintegration of the things that Jupiter signifies, with the potential for volcanic, purgative discharges or releases of pent-up energy and power, intensity, depth, darkness, but then eventually rebirth and resurgence or regenerative energies. So that's one thing that Jupiter-Pluto can represent. On the other hand, on the regenerative side of things, just like the secret light side of the dark age of Kali, is that, when things are difficult, there is a way in which the need for spiritual life becomes so clear, so crystal clear, and we can take to it very easily in ways that we can't always take to when things are really light and easy. So at any rate, all of that being said, it's not none of this is also to take a pessimistic view about the world, or there's always a benefit to, if we can see the opportunity in dark times to benefit from the dark times provide us with the need for spiritual life. So Jupiter Pluto does too. Jupiter Pluto can also represent the corruption of something that looks Jupiterian, that's good, true, whole, just, powerful, strong, in courageous, virtuous, moral ways, or learned or knowledgeable. And we can see those things sort of collapsing or falling apart, or being filled with some kind of corruption or darkness. And then as a result, we can also feel the need more strongly than ever to reform ourselves, to be reborn with real faith, with real substantive values. So that's the sort of maybe the macrocosmic picture of Jupiter and Pluto that we're dealing with for the rest of the year. So I thought you guys would enjoy hearing that. Hopefully it wasn't too heavy. Anyway, now there's a lot more that can be said though. So let's review just very basically. Again, Jupiter sort of philosophically represents that feeling that we live in a cosmos that is just, good, beautiful, true, cohesive, whole. It represents institutions of academics, knowledge, education, religion, the law, legal systems, governments, anything that holds things together and gives a sense of unity and elevating the good qualities in things. And it also signifies abundance, growth, bigness, largeness, expansiveness, but also excessiveness, and always the potential for dogmatic qualities as well. So that's Jupiter, little refresh on Jupiter. Pluto, on the other hand, Pluto is the lord of the underworld of Hades. Now, Hades, the word means riches, which means ultimately Pluto's a very rich planet, but rich like the dark soil, the manure in the dark soil, the sense of life being a compost bin of death, decay, suffering, intensity, sort of the primal scream of reality. And the way that that primal scream is so close to the actual pulse of life. For example, I'll never forget, being in the midwife's section. We went to a midwife sort of clinic within a hospital, so somewhere in between like home labor and hospital labor, sort of an in-between space for both of our children's births, both of my girls. And, it was a whole wing, obviously, of women who were giving birth. I heard a lot of screaming, a lot. And it was, all the women who are listening to this who have kids, like, you don't need me to tell you, but it was primal, and it was raw, and it was, millimeters from birth. You know what I mean? The way that life works in the material universe is through a constant cycle of consumption, and everything is consuming everything else. And when you look at it from that standpoint, it's not pleasant. Like we don't love to, it's like not really Venusian to look at things that way. But it is beautiful from another perspective. If you can see the whole cycle rather than just the carnivorous aspect of the cycle. It's like the Lion King song, The Circle of Life. So Pluto really represents that circle of life, but it's not, Pluto is usually more associated with the degenerative, with the carnivorous, with the destructive forces that precipitate rebirth, that precipitate regeneration. We always include regeneration because we don't want it to sound as though there is no telos or purpose behind which the creation or the destruction is driving. So it's intimately connected with creation, but Pluto is not generally thought of as the planet of, like birth and light and things like that. It has more to do with the destructive end of the spectrum. But it is true also that it's millimeters from the explosion of birth. That's why Pluto will be associated with things like the violent purgatorial discharge of pent-up powers, like a volcano or something like that. It's sort of a beautiful release of sheer life force and power. And although destructive initially, it also is like the expulsion of the child from the womb. It's this powerful, painful, sometimes letting go that immediately floods with life energy. So that's Pluto, right? A complicated energy to talk about. It's not simple. That's why I'm kind of trying to flesh it out a little bit. And you always have people who are like, just wanting to focus on the rebirth. It's like, you couldn't you know, once you see someone and they're talking about, or you talk about anything that's difficult, and then they start white knuckling down on the rebirth, it's like, you know, it's like, oh God, do we have no patience for the destruction part of it? You know, it's like, what are we, if we're eternal beings, then we should be developing some taste for everything. You know what I mean? There's nothing that can really harm the soul. If the soul is never born and will never die, then we have to develop some aesthetic appreciation for all aspects of life. And you can always tell that someone doesn't when they elevate the birth and the light and the, you know, the recreation part of the story. Anyway, that's an aside. I just hate when people die. I feel like Pluto, by the way, who is often associated with, in mythology, Hades, Pluto is often associated with rape. And there's not just the sort of criminal version of the word, but the sense of someone's innocent being from the underworld, sort of reaching up and grabbing some innocent virginal character and sort of, you know, taking away that innocence. And so being raped of something, being forcibly having something stripped or taken away from us, right? So it's funny. I always think it's funny how people, you know, try to pull a fast one on Pluto. They try to rape Pluto of Pluto's darkness. It's like, like, you know, people want to steal or violently take away the reality of darkness in the world with Pluto because it's uncomfortable, and you can't do that. And it's ironic that people try to do that in these like super, almost like fascist ways. They're just like so averse to darkness and the reality of destruction that it becomes ironically destructive. I don't know. I'm also jaded. I was in, you know, I was in the yoga industry as a studio owner for 10 years, and just saw a lot of people come through. Well, a lot of times really well-meaning, nice people who almost like, you're like, you know what, I'll give you a freaking peace sandwich knuckle to the face if you talk about destruction or anything heavy or dark, you know? So that's just, you know, that's ironically, that's the paranoia of Pluto as well. People can be paranoid, so paranoid of darkness that they insist upon lightness and try to turn a blind eye to the reality of destruction. Pluto does not deal well with people like that over time. You know, Pluto transit comes along and a person like that will find themselves in a, you know, in a shit river without a paddle, being like, oh, I guess darkness is real. You know what I mean? Sorry, I'm kind of a jerk today. But anyway, you get the point. So we can't deny Pluto and its darkness, its destructiveness, its intensity, its depth, but also its riches and the sheer force with which life comes forward through destruction, through the flood, through the tidal wave, through the, you know, through the birth canal. It's like that. So anyway, so that's Pluto. Now you're putting the two together, and Jupiter is in its fall in Saturn's sign. Saturn, being the lord of winter, already brings along some of the sense of Jupiterian things dying or ending or being met with some natural decay or wintry conditions. And also, you know, Saturn was one of my classes. Someone brought this up lately, which is a really good point, which is that Saturn is the lord of feigned appearances. Feigned appearances meaning something that tries to look like something, but it is something else. You know, I try to look like I really have your best interest in mind, but I'm just trying to sell you a car. You know what I mean? It's like you say, oh, car salesman. I have no offense to car salesmen. I have some in my family and stuff, like extended family and stuff like that. So, you know, but you've ever been to a sleazy car salesman? It's like they're trying to act like your best friend, and you're like, dude, I know your bottom line. You know, don't give me a feigned appearance here. Well, Saturn actually rules that. And why? Because Saturn is opposite the natural home sign of the sun, both the sun and the moon, which are the lights, which give real, clear knowledge. That's the sun. Saturn, being the opposite sign, will give a feigned light or a feigned knowledge, or will try to fit in with the status quo or the tradition and just do something, you know, in the form that it's recognized by. I go to church on Sundays because that's the thing that you do, and then that makes me look like a responsible, good, moral person. That's Saturn. Someone who goes to church and they open their heart wherever, I mean, any kind of church, I don't care what kind of religion. They go to church and they really open their heart to the divine, right? That's the sun. And then they're like, I'm just here to do my duty. Da, da, da. Feigned appearances, that's Saturn. So Jupiter in Saturn's sign right now in its fall, in the sign of Saturn, feigned appearances from Jupiter. You know, everyone's, you know, everyone right now can see this in politics. My social media feed is filled with all of this. So when that Jupiter comes into contact with Pluto, what happens? Well, you're doubling down on the themes of potential death, darkness, you know, big discharges of powerful energy. And in ways that perhaps signify the death of Jupiterian things: order, justice, goodness, truth, you know, the larger sense of wholesomeness, and feeling somewhat disillusioned, or seeing some powerful scandal emerge, some kind of you know, like what's the song, REM, Losing My Religion. Yeah, you know that's you know that song. Okay, so I think it's REM. Yeah. Anyway, so it's like that. That's sort of Jupiter Pluto. But there's some other specific themes that we can mention. For example, you can see the theme of Jupiter as abundance, but add depth and intensity. So, for example, there can be an abundance of something flooding in, but it's very deep and intense, meaning you might be rewarded with something, or something could be pouring in, but it's, you know, again, you're overwhelmed, and it's, you know, it's like, imagine, you know, when, I guess a simple image that comes to my mind is like, what movie was it? I can't remember. There was a movie, there was like an ad, it was like a cat or a dog or something that was giving birth. Oh, it was 101 Dalmatians. I was watching it with my daughter not long ago. And they were like so shocked that the dog ended up having like 101 puppies. It was like, how many? 10, 20, 30? And then there, you know, there ended up being like 100 or whatever it was. I think I'm getting that right. So it's like a huge amount of something that suddenly you're flooded with, and it's kind of good and joyful and abundant, but also maybe really intense and problematic. Like, again, I think I gave the example somewhat recently of starting a business and getting flooded with, you know, clients right away, and not being able to handle it, and suddenly being just, it's almost just like the, you know, a natural disaster as well as a gift. Do you see what I'm saying? So that's kind of a Jupiter Pluto thing you can watch for. You can think about the enhanced need for power, authority, or status with a little Plutonian Dark Lord twist, little Darth Vader-y. You can think about broad-mindedness, which is Jupiterian, about dark, controversial, or taboo matters. That's Plutonian. You can think about massive events or things happening. For example, in 2000 and, or when was it? Yeah, I think it was 2008, the last time that Jupiter and Pluto were in the same sign. And I think it was 2007 when they actually conjoined in Sagittarius. But that was when they were in Capricorn. Last was in 2008. They didn't exactly conjoin. But when they did conjoin in 2007, if I'm remembering correctly, there was a huge T3, I want to say it was called, chemical plant explosion in like Gainesville or Jacksonville, Florida, or something like that. So it was a massive explosion that was like headline in the news. So similarly, sometimes there's going to be just these massive events where something really big and widespread is taking place. For example, the coronavirus and all of the panic associated with it. But I'll come around to that more in a bit. So massive things, big events, big dramatic explosive events, big explosions literally sometimes. Learning experiences that are dark, deep, intense, controversial, taboo, show us our shadow side, or the shadow side of a teacher or teaching. You know, so for example, let's say there is someone that you perceive as your enemy, right? Like, I don't know, someone that you feel they have a very different perspective than you do on some political issue. But, and you think to yourself, you know, I'm really the better person. I really have the more evolved position. But then you're in Target and you're picking up some stuff, and you know, maybe you lose your cool somehow, and you yell at someone, and, you know, your enemy happens to come to the rescue. And then you're faced with the idea suddenly of this other person that you thought of was your enemy. Maybe they're wearing a shirt that says vote for so-and-so. You're like, oh, there's my enemy. But actually, they just helped out the old lady that I tried to push over with my cart because I was pissed off in Target. Does that happen to you? I guess maybe it could happen. I actually had one person in the Whole Foods parking lot here in Washington, D.C. one time in Silver Spring. I pulled into a parking spot that someone was trying to take, you know, it was like I was clearly the next person, and then the person was going to try to cut in. And so I got into the parking spot before them, and this person literally, after I got out of my car and I started walking towards Whole Foods, they went and got a cart and started chasing me with it like a bull, right? Trying to like mow me down. I swear to God, have you ever seen that? There's this music video called "It's Getting Real" in the Whole Foods parking lot. Anyway, it's like, it's the most yuppie. We're trying to eat organic. We're like, vegetarians and stuff. So, and there's a close grocery store to our yoga studio, so we'd walk there, whatever. I was like, man, these people are ruthless. That's pretty Jupiter Pluto, actually. So the murder that happens in the Whole Foods parking lot, that would be Jupiter Pluto. Anyway, but you can also see this this idea of like learning something from your enemy, right? Like maybe there's some kind of exchange that you have with someone. Maybe it's not bowling someone over in Target, but it's often the case that the person that you consider to be most immoral, most corrupt, most decadent, whatever the case might be, might suddenly have something to teach you. The tables get flipped, and we have to be humbled by looking at our own darkness or our own double standards or hypocrisy. That's a very Jupiter Pluto kind of thing. We can think about extreme ambition, intellectually, spiritually, morally, or materially. And by extreme, I usually mean a little bit dark, intense, and a little, again, like a little Darth Vader's in there, a little Darth Vader in there. How about what grows in the shade? Some things that are very lovely grow in the shade, but what I mean by that is what grows in the shade, what grows in the dark places, in the dark, damp, marshy, swampy places, not always good things, right? So my wife as an herbalist would, tell me exactly which particular herbs grow in the shady places that are very lovely. But you can get what I'm saying. Like, how about bacteria and how about viruses? So the spread or proliferation or growth or expansion, Jupiter, of something deep, heavy, dark, and destructive, like a tumor, or like a virus. That is something that I talked about as early as talking about Jupiter's entrance into Capricorn because of Pluto being here. So let's see, authority and threats to authority, the things that people in authority will do when they feel threatened. All of those are Jupiter Pluto conversations. Obsession with greatness or bigness. Corruption of religious or academic environments. For example, University of Maryland, not far from where I live, is closing down after spring break. Harvard, I think, closed down and is doing things online. So you can see the fall and state of like religious institutions. There was in DC, one of the places that ended up spreading the coronavirus was a church. Not to say anything about the church, but just this is the kinds of things that you can see. Beneficial breakdowns or death. Sometimes people will die and then leave you money. I know, not saying that we want that necessarily, but sometimes there can be this kind of release of destructive power that ends up giving a gift or has a really big silver lining, Jupiter. There can also be the philosophy needed to enact very deep and powerful regeneration. For example, that moment where you're like, wait a second, I'll burn it all down. You're like, yes, that's what needs to happen. I had this moment actually in my MFA program when I was writing my first book. I had a draft of the book and it was all like ready, and I was thinking about it and I was just like, I had that sinking feeling. I was like, you rushed. When did I start rushing? And then I traced back my steps and I saw all of the ways in which I had rushed through the late chapters. Actually the middle chapters. And I got back and I realized, like, I rushed this whole thing. And in realizing that I rushed it, I now know where I need to start. And then like that, it was like, like the Doc hair from Back to the Future, like, like, okay, that's it. And then this is me, like maybe I was just like an emo, in my late 20s, like in grad school, but I was like, okay, I'm torching it. I took the whole thing, I printed it off, deleted it, took it out onto my little grill on my back desk, like poured gas, the lighter fluid or whatever all over it, lit it. And I was just like, I'm free. I'm, like, well, sometimes I was like, I look back on that and I'm like, that was so dramatic. I could have just deleted the file and been like, okay, well, thank you for the observation. But no, with, this Pluto energy, and I have Pluto squared my sun in my natal chart. So, the Plutonian energy often feels like, with Jupiter, like this philosophical realization that will come in and this kind of like expansive feeling. And then it's accompanied by the need to sort of like, torch something metaphorically, let's hope, but that's the basic idea. So Let's see, where am I? Fanaticism and righteousness run amok. I hate to say it, but right now my social media feed, whether people are on the left or the right, sounds about the same. I don't mean to be a jerk, but like the fanaticism is over the top right now. It's just bonkers. And I don't care who it's coming. It could be left, right, middle. I don't care. It's just right now with Jupiter and Pluto, everyone feels like we've got the ticket to everlasting, eternal, positive change in the world. And the other group doesn't and is unevolved and unenlightened. And not only that, but they might be communists or they might be Nazis or they, it's like all of these like really, intense ways of caricaturizing one another. And it's one of the reasons I just don't watch the news and try to stay away from social media outside of listening to things that really kind of feed my soul. And one of the things about Jupiter Pluto season is you're treated to that all the way through election season. Aren't we all lucky? But the other thing that can come with it, of course, is again, fanaticism and righteousness run amok. Like Jupiter's like, I'm right. And Pluto's like, yes. And I'm going to make you feel pain because of my rightness. And anyone can do that. Even the virtuous kind of good guys, whoever they might be, could do that right now. It's just to be really careful of it. You can also see when development or progress is destructive. You know what? I'm going to make a community center for everyone to come and experience healing. And in the meantime, I'm driving a bulldozer through between, me and anything in my way. It's like, okay, well, it's going to defeat the purpose, or you know what I mean? So you have to be careful of that right now, where there's this sense of, wanting to grow something that seems really virtuous or good, but having this really intense, potentially destructive element involved. Ego, wasteful or excessive to dark extremes. You can think about the presence of the Lord of Death, of waste, of criminal power, underworld, subterranean manipulation and power. These are all Pluto-Jupiter themes. Also empowerment of the old and traditional, as well as potential destruction of the old and traditional. They seem like they're contrary, but they can actually both be happening at different times in different places. For example, you might see someone that's kind of old school, it's like Jupiter, a planet of kings and emperors, in Saturn's sign, the old king, the old power, the old person becoming empowered, or the old way of doing things being met with some kind of purgatorial release of pent-up energy, which can be very destructive. And sometimes the destruction of old Jupiterian ways of doing things, morally, legally, institutions of learning, etc., can go through these changes that are actually very positive, even though they might be a little destructive in the process. You can also think of the resurrecting of things from the dead, old things becoming young things, or young things becoming weirdly old things. For example, did you know that the last time Jupiter and Pluto were together in the same sign of Capricorn, that The Curious Case of Benjamin Button was a film that came out that year, really kind of weirdly encapsulates that energy. But in terms of resurrecting things that are old or dead or not working, as well as, a few other themes that I'll mention. George Mitchell, who was a senator in 2008, accused 89 retired and active Major League Baseball players of steroid use, some of them who were using steroids to preserve the power and strength of their youth. A number of them very famously. So that is that's a complicated Jupiter-Pluto theme. And also the need to get bigger, but doing it through dark drugs and drug rings and stuff like that. That's the steroid use as well. There were also some films that came out that year that perfectly encapsulate the Jupiter-Pluto themes. For example, The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight is a vigilante who comes to deliver justice in the face of a corrupt system. So that's the Dark Knight Batman. So similar, you get that feeling of almost like vigilante justice, or what happens when there's darkness and justice of Jupiter kind of combined. The movie Twilight came out, which similarly empowers vampires as heroes in a sense. Iron Man came out, which is very, very Jupiter-Pluto. It's kind of a dark, if you've seen the show, Wall-E, if you remember that, which is about the resurrection of like a new world in the face of a kind of post-apocalyptic destruction of planet Earth. It was a sweet little kids movie, but it's very Jupiter-Pluto in that it has this kind of post-apocalyptic feeling of the something that's dead and something that's trying to be resurgent in the face of death. You had some epic apocalyptic movies that year, like Cloverfield. I don't know if you guys saw that movie or not, but that was kind of an epic apocalyptic movie. You also have the potential of the rise of greatness from a lowly place. Jupiter in its fall can mean that you're in a lowly place, and hitting Pluto can mean that there's some abundance or some riches that come to one despite having started in a lowly place. That's a Jupiter-Pluto dynamic with Jupiter in its fall. So Slumdog Millionaire came out in 2008, which is a pretty good example of this. So did The Incredible Hulk, which is basically a movie about an action comic hero that's kind of like a version of steroids. He becomes, the Hulk. Rambo, another vigilante character, and Gran Torino, also a Clint Eastwood movie about an old man who's kind of a bigot who ends up becoming sort of adapting his views on some level and becoming a hero. So there's these plays on age and corruption, and the dark form of justice, those kinds of themes, as well as literal plays on aging, all very interesting. So I thought you would enjoy some of these comparisons. I hope that they made enough sense. I may do another video on Jupiter Pluto because we got a while to go with it, but probably what we'll do is take a look at some of the other transits happening at the end of this month to really give you a deeper feel for how this transit is combining with some of those other transits at the end of March and beginning of April. So I'd love to hear your stories in the comment section. Tell me how you're noticing Jupiter Pluto in your own life. I'd love to hear from you. And also tell me how if you have Jupiter Pluto in your natal chart, how you've related to it. I'd love to hear that as well. So thanks so much, everyone. We'll talk again soon. Bye.